Today in this video, I have brought together all of my favorite creepiest, scary horror stories that I have posted. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. I live in Nebraska. At the time of this traumatic experience, I had not long moved out from my parents' house. My new house is in a small neighborhood, and I had been living there for a month and was just settling in. My house was kind of a mess, as I had decor that needed to be made and lots of painting stuff scattered around. If you know what Nebraska is like, then you know the weather can be pretty rough. I had been sent home early from work as the forecast was terrible. I prepared myself and settled in for a stormy night. I did not have work the next day, which was a bonus. My evening flew by quickly, but the weather got worse as the night went on. I made some sandwiches and kept myself busy by reading a book. The thunder was really bad, so I did not want to use any electric until it had passed. I must have nodded off for a while because I woke up to thunder and lightning. I jumped out of my skin as I honestly thought my house had been struck. By this point, it was late, so I headed to my kitchen to get some water to take up to bed with me. I stood over my sink, filling up my glass, and a flash of lightning lit up the dark sky. I dropped my glass and lost my thoughts. All I saw was a reflection of someone standing right behind me. My heart was racing, almost coming out of my chest. I grabbed the sink out of instinct. Seconds later, another flash appeared, and the person was gone. I ran to my front and back door, ensuring they were locked. I already knew all my windows were shut, as I hadn't opened them since being there. I thought maybe I was just tired, so I cleaned up the glass and went to bed. I was fully awake, and my heart was still pounding. I got myself ready for bed, and knew I would not settle, especially with the weather being so bad. After what felt like 2 hours, I managed to go to sleep. Things soon took a turn for the worse. I slowly opened my eyes and saw a tall figure at the end of my bed. It did not look human. I could not move. My body was numb. It lasted for a few minutes and I was dripping with sweat. My heart was once again pounding. I finally snapped out of it and the figure was gone. I grabbed my phone and it was approaching 3:30 a.m. After 5 minutes of shock, I searched around my house to make sure no one was inside. All my doors were locked and there was no sign of entry. I did not sleep that night. In fact, it took me a while before I could sleep normally again. I spent a week on my sofa as I was too scared to go back to my room. I have so many questions as to what happened that night, all left unanswered. I do still live in that house, but have not had anything else happen. I honestly don't know what it was. Was it a burglar, or was it demonic? Back in 2019, when I lived in Canada, me and a few buds went exploring in a forest. We had a week off school and wanted to do something fun. We had actually watched a few videos on YouTube of people hiking and camping in forests. It looked fun, so at first on Tuesday midday, we went out for a walk, and also to find a spot we could camp in. The forest we found was quiet, and others barely walked them. The day we spent out there was fine. There was nothing out of the ordinary. It was very quiet, which was the creepy part. But other than that, it was fine. We did lots of hiking and found a good place for our tent. It was on an open bit of ground, and the trees around shielded us. We planned to go camping on the Friday night, which gave us a few days to prepare. I planned the majority of it, as my bro had gone camping a few times in the past. He gave me his tent to use and other necessities. I also brought some instant barbecues, which you dispose of after. Fast forward to Friday afternoon. We were set and ready to go. My buddies came to mine, and my bro was kind enough to take us to the start of the forest. It took us an hour of hiking to get to our camping spot. I didn't tell my buds anything, but just as we were around 10 minutes from our camping spot, I had a weird feeling someone was following us. I didn't see or hear anything. I just had that weird feeling. Two of my buddies set up the tent and I set up our barbecue. It only took me a minute, and they were still setting the tent up. So I roamed off to get some firewood for the campfire we planned to make at night. Lucky for me, I didn't need to go too far from the campsite, as there was a lot of wood around. I had enough wood, but I got some extra, just in case. And just as I bent down to get the last bits of wood, I stood back up and felt something tap my shoulder. I dropped all the wood and turned around. The terrifying thing was that no one was there. I quickly scooped the woods into my arms and ran back to my buds. They had finished the tent, and I asked them if they followed me out to play tricks on me. They replied with no. I told them what happened, and they just laughed and said I was probably imagining it. I didn't say much and just agreed, but I know what I felt. We sat down and cooked some food. I brought some pop in one of the backpacks to have with our food. We ate our food, and the sun started to set. I made a campfire to keep us warm and keep the area well lit up. The sun was now down, and it was dark in the forest. At this point, I realized how dumb we was. We weren't in a safe campsite, just a clear spot of land we had stumbled across. We all sat around the campfire and toasted marshmallows. We all got comfortable, and one of my buddies thought it was fun if we told each other creepy horror stories. Being honest, I was already hating it there, so I passed and went to the tent to try go to sleep. Just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard tapping on the flimsy tent. I opened the tent zip and shouted at my friends to stop messing around. They were both sat down by the campfire and had no idea what I was on about. I still felt like they were messing with me, so I just told them to cut it out and went back in the tent. I did eventually fall asleep. It was hard as I did hear some of the stories they were talking about. I was awoken by the same tapping I heard earlier and quickly jumped out of the tent to shout at my buddies, only to realize they weren't out there. I went back into the tent, and they were actually sound asleep. I quickly zipped the tent back up and woke them up. I told them we needed to leave as something wasn't right. Just as I was finishing my sentence, footsteps surrounded the tent. I grabbed my torch and my phone. I rang my bro, but he didn't answer, so I rang again. He was half asleep, but I told him we were in trouble and needed help. I gave him brief directions as to where we were. The footsteps did eventually stop. We sat in the tent for an hour until I heard my bro shout my name. It took him some time to get to us due to the area we were in. We all ran out of the tent as quickly as we could. The drive home, I told my bro what had happened. Because of that terrifying trip, I know for certain I will never go camping again. It was a Monday night, and I had not long finished work. I was taking my normal route home. The only things that were different was that I needed to pop into the gas station, and I was driving late at night. This was because I had to stay on and complete some of my work I had fallen behind on. 10 to 10, I left my office and was finally relaxed. I had finished work. The road I take is quiet, and being honest at nighttime, it was very creepy. This was the first time I'd driven it at night. My house is around 20 to 25 minutes away, so the drive normally flies by. I started my drive like normal, thinking of what I could make for dinner when I got home. My thoughts were soon interrupted when I noticed someone standing on the sidewalk. I couldn't really make out much. They were wearing a long black coat with a hood over their head. What freaked me out was they weren't walking. They were just standing still. I just carried on like normal and minded my own business. The gas station was in sight, and I got out to fill my tank. It was late, meaning it was empty, so I was happy I didn't have to wait around. I filled my tank and went in to pay. I walked in, and there was no one at the counter. I looked around and couldn't see anyone. Just as I turned around, I heard a whisper. I couldn't make out what was said. Before I could even think, a woman came out to the counter. I asked her if anyone else was working as I heard something. She said no, it was just her on shift. Something was telling me to look at my car. And when I did, I saw what looked like the same person I saw on the sidewalk. I was worried they were trying to steal my car as I didn't lock it due to the gas station being empty. I paid the $80 and rushed out. I got back to my car, and they were gone. I checked inside my car to make sure they weren't inside. No, they weren't. I just got in my car and drove. I was driving around 40 as I just wanted to get home. And yet again, about a mile away from the gas station, the same person was standing on the side of the road. They were staring at my car as I drove past. There's no way they managed to get that far in such little time. That's when I started getting creeped out. I put my foot down, now doing 60. I made it home, had a quick shower, and went straight to bed. I lost my appetite and just wanted the night to be over. I called in sick the next day and didn't tell my boss, as I didn't think anyone would believe me. I do still work in the same workplace, but I never drive at night, and I take a different route. I can't fully comprehend what happened that night, whether someone was playing a prank on me, or that there was something paranormal going on. I haven't experienced anything like that again, but I do worry every time I drive home. It was my first time being a mom. I was slowly getting the hang of motherhood. My husband is great, and we work together. This encounter happened 2 years ago when my baby was 6 months old. I remember it like it was yesterday. Me and my partner had a long day, and so we decided to have a calm evening together, cooking a meal and then watching films. We fed our baby and put him to bed in his nursery. We had a baby monitor which picked up sound and live video footage. Once our baby was settled, which was around 8-ish, we cooked our dinner. We had steak, chips, mushrooms, and tomatoes. It was so nice to spend quality time together and enjoy each other's company. Anyway, we ate our food and watched a film. It got to 10 at night, and the baby monitor was making strange noises. We watched the live video, and our baby was fine. I had not long checked on him. We thought maybe it was glitching and continued watching the movie. About 10 minutes had passed, and it started doing it again. But this time, there was also mumbling. Our baby started crying, and as I looked at the screen, I saw a scary phenomenon. It looked like a ghost standing over our baby's cot. We ran so fast up the stairs and into the nursery. I got my baby, and we went downstairs. We decided to stay at my husband's mom's house, as we both knew what we saw, and we did not feel comfortable spending the night at home. We have lived in our house for 3 years before this creepy encounter. That's why I was so freaked out, as nothing like that has ever happened while living there. I've never felt scared in my own home until that night. A couple of days passed, and we went home, and thankfully, nothing happened again. As I said, we both knew what we saw, and are genuinely confused, and still a little scared to this current day. I worked in a small office on the outskirts of London. It was a fairly small office, and there was only me and 5 other workers. We all ran a clothing business together. I had stayed back one evening to focus on some advertising and to manage some of the social media accounts. Everyone had left for the day except my boss, Anna. She was staying behind to create more content. I put my head down and let nothing distract me, because I kept telling myself the quicker I get it done, the quicker I can get back home. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment about 15 minutes from the office. Now, this is where things get a little creepy. Anna had asked me to go down to our storage room and get a few clothes from there, as she was trialing some things out. I barely went down here, as it was in the basement of the office, and I was always creeped out with how dark and cold it was down there. Anyway, I did what was asked of me and headed down. I grabbed the clothes she had requested, and just as I was about to run back up the stairs, I heard something move. Something was telling me to go back upstairs and ignore it, but the other half of me was telling me to look. Unfortunately, I chose to be nosy. I looked around to ensure I hadn't dropped anything on my way out. Silly, really, as I'm always careful. I searched the floors and the boxes, and everything was in its place. Until I noticed on one of our clothing rails, there was a coat hanger swinging. I didn't look back. I just headed out. The reason I left so quickly was because I never went in that area. The clothes I got were from some boxes. And no, there were no clothes on that rail, so nothing would have fallen off. I told Anna what had happened, and she didn't say much. To make matters worse, she told me she had to close up her tasks as she had to get home, and she politely asked me to make sure the office was locked up. The thing is, I am comfortable locking up, as I have done it a few times in the past. The thing I wasn't comfortable with was staying alone. I kept pushing myself, as I only had one advertisement left to edit and post, which would take around an hour roughly. I also kept telling myself that maybe there was a loose hanger and it had fallen, causing the hanger to move. I knew deep down that it wasn't a good enough reason, but I had to pretend it was. Just as I was closing up my computer, my coworker's chair, which was at the desk next to mine, had moved by itself. It didn't move much, but it moved enough for me to know that it was not caused by wind or anything human. I grabbed my bags, locked the main office door, and headed to my car. I got to my car and had to take a minute to comprehend what was happening. I believe in good and bad spirits, but nothing in my 24 years like that has ever happened to me. I headed home and decided to make a microwave meal and head to bed. It was only 8 at night, but I tried blaming my tiredness on what I had witnessed. I nodded off on the sofa and woke up a few hours later. It was 11:30, so I decided to get ready for bed. I didn't stress too much, as I had a couple of days off work. As I was walking up the stairs, I heard something drop on the kitchen floor. I thought to myself, this couldn't be happening. Has the spirit, or whatever it was, followed me back home? I went to the kitchen and hoped it was nothing, but when I entered, I saw my empty microwave pot in the middle of the floor. Now at this point, I was 100% certain this was something paranormal. I had put my pot far back on the side, so there was no way it had fell by itself. Something had pushed it. I went straight to bed, as I couldn't take any more. As I lay in my cold bed, I started questioning myself. Was I hallucinating? No, I can't be. I have never hallucinated before. I knew this wasn't me. It was something sinister. A couple of days passed, and nothing had happened. I was weary about going back to work, but again, nothing had happened. It's like it was all made up. Whatever it was, it disappeared, leaving me with 100 questions. The scariest, unexplainable thing that I have ever experienced happened to me 2 years ago today. Skip back a bit to when I moved into a small apartment in Pennsylvania. This was my first time living alone and owning my own place, so my nerves were already high as it was. I had my brother come stay with me for a couple of nights and help me set everything all up. I took a few days off work to move in and get comfortable in my new home. Those couple of nights were fine and flew by quickly. About a few days had passed, and I was staying there by myself. I went back to work, and everything was going well. I worked a 9-to-5 job as a sales advisor, and in my evenings, I would either go to the gym or visit family. I was always so tired after work and would aim to be in bed for 10 so I could achieve my goal of 8 hours of sleep. I arrived home from work at 5:45, and I didn't feel like doing anything other than watching TV and eating lots of food. As I was resting on the couch, I noticed something in my window. I looked over, and it looked like a shadow of something. I couldn't make it out. I walked towards the window, and it had disappeared. I looked around outside, and nothing was there. Only the cold, fresh air hitting my face. I questioned what I was looking for, and why I was looking, because I was on the 3rd floor, and nothing other than birds could possibly be outside my window, right? I slumped back on my couch and decided to finish watching my program. I'll admit, in that moment, I just brushed it off. I continued to stuff my face, and before I knew it, my program had finished. I sat myself upright and turned the TV off. As the screen went dark, my eyes locked onto something strange reflecting off the screen. The only way I can describe it, and it still freaks me out to this day. It was tall and thin-built, with a small amount of hair and demonic eyes. Honestly, it felt like my soul left my body. I ran to my bedroom and slammed the door shut. I pushed my bedside table in front the door to block it. I texted my brother, but there was no reply. He must have been asleep. It was hard, but I decided to try and get to sleep, as I was truly too scared to leave that room. I slept a few hours, and as soon as daylight entered my window, I felt a little safe. I gathered a few things together and chucked them in a paper bag, grabbed my car keys and left. I arrived at my family home and told them everything. I no longer wanted to live there, so I stayed with my family in search of a new home. I can't honestly describe the feeling I felt that night. I knew there was no way I was going to continue living there. My family were happy for me to stay with them until I found another place. I eventually, after a couple of months, found another place, and it worked out better for me as it was only 10 minutes from my work. Thankfully, I have never experienced anything like that in my new home, and I hope it continues to stay that way. My family must think I was crazy, but my gut never lies, and if I stayed, I believe it would have kept happening, and something bad could have happened. Around a year ago, I went through a pretty rough night. The weather had been terrible all day, as we had a storm pass by. The rain and wind was hammering on the windows and the roof. It honestly sounded like my roof was going to fly off. I lived alone with my dog. He hated the storm, so he cuddled into me all evening. I spent the night watching the TV. It did cut out and lose connection a few times, but it wasn't too bad. It got to 11 p.m., and I decided to go up to bed. Thankfully, I was on my days off, so I did not have to be up early, as I knew this storm would definitely keep me awake. I let my dog go out for the toilet, as he did not go much throughout the day as he was frightened. Just as he was walking back inside, his body tensed, and he was staring at the back gate. I couldn't see anyone, and just assumed he had saw a cat or something. It took me a few minutes to get him inside, which was weird, as he usually listens right away, and with the weather being so bad, I thought he would come running in. Eventually, he came inside, and we went to bed. I got ready for bed, and then sat on my phone for 30 minutes to help make me tired. All of a sudden, I heard a loud bang. It was thunder. It shook me up, as it came from nowhere. About a minute later, someone was knocking at my door. My dog started barking. My first thought was that someone needed help, so I got out of bed to answer. I opened the door, and nobody was there. This is where I started to get a weird feeling, as someone definitely knocked on my door. I put my shoes on and had a quick look outside. I went down the side of my house, and a rush of fear hit me as I saw my back gate was open. I ran back inside, locking the door on my way in. I got back into my bed, and I was anxious. I tried reassuring myself. Maybe it was just the wind that opened the gate, right? And maybe I was just hearing things as I was tired. The loud sounds of rain and thunder started to make me tired. Just as I was about to drift off, I heard footsteps coming from downstairs. Now, at this point, I started losing my shit. I was so scared, I did not know what to do. My mind went blank. The footsteps sounded like they were getting louder, and by this point, my dog had noticed them too. He started barking, and for once I was so happy he was barking. I prayed this would scare whoever was in my house away. I got my phone and called the cops. I couldn't take any risks. I pushed my bedside cabinet in front the door and cuddled with my dog. It took them around 45 minutes to arrive due to the poor weather. I jumped at the sound of cops storming their way upstairs. They told me there was no sign of anyone in the house, but there was evidence that someone was. Muddy footsteps were stained on my white carpets, and the back gate and back door was opened. I'm annoyed with myself, as I must have left the back door unlocked after taking my dog out earlier, as I was distracted by his behavior. The cops left as they were really busy that night. They reassured me that no one was in or outside my house. They told me to call them if anything happens again. I did feel a lot safer, as the person would be stupid to return after the cops had been called. I didn't sleep much that night, and I'm grateful that nothing else happened that night. In fact, till this day, nothing has happened. Me and my wife, Julie, live in a small neighborhood in South Carolina. The area is quiet, and there aren't many houses around. I work most of the time, and so does Julie, so we only have a couple of days off a week. We spend these days catching up with the shopping and housework. We spend every evening together, which means we still have our time together. It was a Thursday, and we both had the day off. We spent the morning shopping and then spent the afternoon walking. We got home and I surprised Julie by telling her I had booked us a table in a fancy restaurant. This was nice for us as we hadn't gone for a meal in a few months due to us working a lot. We went for our meal and enjoyed our night out. I pulled up on the garage and Julie noticed the back gate was slightly opened. We don't lock the back gate due to our neighborhood being quiet. And we also keep our house doors locked at all times so no one could get in. I looked around the back just to make sure nobody was there. I then locked the gate up as Julie insisted, as she felt anxious about it being opened. We went back inside, and to finish our night, we watched a movie with some snacks and a glass of wine each. Roughly 45 minutes into the movie, our home phone started ringing, which was unusual as it was 10:30 at night. I picked up the phone and heard a buzzing sound. I asked who was there and the phone hung up. I said, "That was weird." And Julie asked who was it. I explained how it was buzzing and then it hung up. We thought maybe someone had the wrong number and just continued to watch the movie. Just as the movie was finishing, the phone went off again. I answered it and said in an angrier tone, "Who is calling?" A deep voice replied, "Look outside." This made my heart drop into my stomach. I instantly ran to the window and looked out the front yard. Julie asked me what was wrong, and I said to her that the person calling told me to look outside. Nothing was out there. I then made my way to the back doors as we had large double doors, and again, there was nothing out there. I felt relieved and pulled the curtains too. I said that maybe someone was just prank calling us as it was late at night. But we weren't really sure who would do that as not many people have our number. We chose to go to bed as we felt creeped out, and it was getting late. We also felt more tired than usual as we had a busy day. We went to the bathroom, cleaned our teeth, and got ready for bed. We were both happy to finally be settled. This didn't last long. Our house phone upstairs started ringing. We had one phone upstairs and one downstairs. Julie looked at me with fear and asked what was going on. I looked at her and said, "Honestly, my love, I have no idea and I'm not standing for it anymore." I got out of my comfy bed and grabbed the phone. I shouted, "Stop calling. If you call this number one more time, I will be calling the police." The same deep voice replied, "Look outside in your backyard." Before I could reply, they hung up. I shot up out of bed and told my wife to stay calm and that I was going to investigate. I went downstairs to get a better view of my backyard. I pulled open the curtains and my eyes scanned everywhere. As expected, there was nobody there. I shut the curtains back up and walked away. What I heard next gave me the chills. Someone was tapping on the back doors. My wife started screaming. I ran so fast up the stairs, almost tripping down them. Julie was standing by the window, shaking in fear. This window led out to the front yard. I looked out, and there was a man wearing all black. I couldn't make out who it was, as they also had a large hoodie on, which covered half their face. Now, at this point, I suspected there was two people trying to invade our house. Julie locked the bedroom door while I phoned the police. I told the operator everything that had happened. She reassured me and told us to stay locked in until the police arrived. She asked for more information on the situation, so I gave it to her. It wasn't long, and the police arrived. There was two of them. One was searching the back, and one was searching the front. We gave them statements and spent the night at my mother-in-law's. We were horribly shaken up, so we both knew we wasn't going to stay there the night. And also, this gave the police space to search and gather information. We have so many questions and worries as to what those people wanted. Was they trying to break in and steal stuff? Or was they trying to harm us? It still shakes us up to this day as we have no answers. I lived in a fairly big neighborhood and decided it was best I buy a camera for my front door. The main reason I wanted one was because in the last couple of months, a few of my parcels have been getting stolen, so I wanted to improve my home security. I bought the camera off Amazon, and what I liked most about it was that I could link it to my phone and watch it live. It also made me aware of when someone was near. I had it for a few months before anything weird started happening. I woke up, and the first thing I did was check my phone. I opened my phone and saw I had a notification from my camera app. This was usually normal, as a cat or someone walking by would set it off. But this time, it wasn't. I had 5 notifications from 2 till 4 in the morning. I watched them back, and honestly, what I saw freaked me out. Across my road stood a tall man. He was wearing all black. The hood from his hoodie was covering his face, so I couldn't see anything. The video would glitch out, and he would be gone. And then 20 minutes later, he would reappear, and so on. I wasn't really sure what to do. Also, the fact I lived alone made me feel scared. I decided to leave it, and if anything happened again, I would report it. My day went fine, and before I knew it, 2 days had gone by. I had a long day at work, so I went straight home, cooked some dinner, and hit the couch. Everything seemed normal. I was watching a movie and was relaxed. This was until I heard a knock at my door. It was 8 at night and wasn't expecting any parcels. I opened the door slowly, and no one was there. I instantly shut the door and thought I was hearing things. I settled back on the couch, and 15 minutes later, I had a notification from my camera app. My stomach dropped. My trembling hands opened the app, and I was in shock. Once again, across my road stood the same tall man, wearing the exact same clothes. I ran to my door and locked it. I then ran upstairs and called the cops. I explained everything to the call handler, and she said to stay in my house and the cops should be there quickly. I did indeed stay inside. I even locked myself in my bathroom. Minutes passed and the cops got here quickly. I let them in and showed them the footage. They had 2 cops searching the area. Unfortunately, they couldn't find anything. They assured me that they would collect evidence and have cops patrol the area. They took things like that very seriously and were good at ensuring safety within the community. Due to me living alone and being shaken up, I stayed with my best friend for a few nights. I was informed by the cops when I went back home that they still could not find anything, but will not be giving up. I spent days worrying and had sleepless nights. Thankfully, nothing has happened again. But I still panic because to this day, it's never been solved. I was 21 at the time, and I was working as a lorry driver. I worked as a lorry driver for roughly 2 years. My shift pattern was 4 on and then 4 off. It was a pretty good work-life balance for me. My route started off as normal on a Thursday evening, starting off at London and finishing at Edinburgh in Scotland. It was a simple route for me and one of my favorites. I would stay on the A1 road and stop at service stations for my rest. I headed out at 7:45 in the evening and was expected to reach my destination around 2:45 in the morning. About 1 hour into my drive, I come to a stop due to an accident. This wasn't a problem for me, as it's happened a few times. I just hope everyone's okay when I come across these things. I was only at a stop for 1 hour, and after that, the traffic was back to normal. It got dark pretty quickly due to it being winter. One of the things I hated most, the main thing, is the weather, as it would sometimes be dangerous due to ice and snow. Anyway, things soon started going wrong. I pulled into the service station and found a place to park so I could have an hour's rest. I had my rest, woke up at midnight, and got ready to hit the road. I pulled back the curtains, and in the distance stood a few tall trees. Between the trees, I had noticed a ghostly figure. It moved quickly, and I didn't quite believe it. I just assumed I was still tired due to just waking up, and I was just seeing things. I headed back off with only 2 hours to go. I had a few snacks to keep me going, and of course my iced coffee. The rest of the drive on the A1 was quiet, and time flew by quickly. I took the exit of the A1 and had a few quiet small lanes to take before reaching my destination. These lanes would creep me out due to no one being around, and also because they were hard to drive down. It wasn't too bad time-wise, as it would only take 20 to 25 minutes. And just like that, I knew something was about to happen. I once again noticed in the distance that ghostly figure I saw earlier. I did start to panic, as I knew I wasn't making it up. I wasn't even tired anymore, so I couldn't blame it on tiredness. I put my foot down and continued the route to get myself out of there as soon as possible. Things couldn't have gone worse for me. Because I was so distracted, I had taken the wrong turn. The lanes were too small for me to turn around. I had to continue on. To make things better, my phone sat-nav wasn't rerouting me, which made me anxious. Finally, after 1 minute, which felt like 1 hour, it rerouted me. Coming to the end of the lanes, I had checked my sat-nav to ensure I was going the correct way. Just as I looked back up at the road, a woman was standing in the distance. I slammed the brakes and wished I never looked at her. She had long, brown, scruffy hair. Her clothes were ripped, and what caught my attention the most was the blood stain on her pale face. I squeezed my eyes shut, and once I opened them, she was gone. I just wanted this trip to be finished. I managed to get to the warehouse and drop off the load. I found a parking space, pulled in, and got some rest. I did want to drive straight back to London and get home, but there is a limit on how much we can drive in a day, and that is 9 hours. I had my sleep, thankfully not experiencing anything. I woke up, and when it was time, I headed back to London. I told my wife everything, and she had said something that made my skin run cold. Her words were, "What if that woman was involved in the accident at the start of your shift?" In that moment, it hit me, and really did make me think, what if she was? And if so, why was she following me? I've never shared this story before due to the fact I will constantly live in fear, but I now want to share it. Me and my husband had moved into what we thought was our forever home. It was in the countryside, and it was a very old house. We were there for about 8 months before things started happening. Every morning, I started waking up to my wardrobe doors being opened. We didn't think much of it at first and assumed the doors were just old. Every day for a month this happened, so we decided to get a new set of wardrobes to put a stop to it. It did stop for around a week, and then it started again. At first, we didn't think of anything paranormal, due to the fact nothing else had happened in the house. So it continued on, and other things soon started happening. One morning, I went into the kitchen, and the tap was dripping, which also started happening every morning. We had called a plumber out to have a look at it, and they said the sink was perfectly fine. We now started suspecting something was in the house with us. One night, a night you'll never forget, I had sleep paralysis. This has never happened to me. At 3 a.m, my wardrobe door had slowly opened, and a head was leaning out of it. It was dark, so I couldn't see much, but I was certain I saw a demon. It had red eyes and horns. The way I felt in that moment was terrifying. What I saw was very disturbing. Once I snapped out of it, I shot up and screamed. My husband comforted me, and eventually, I fell asleep. The next morning, my husband arrived home with some cameras for the rooms. He installed one in our bedroom and one in our kitchen. The first night, there was nothing on the cameras, but the second night confirmed it all. That night, I once again had the same sleep paralysis as I did a couple of nights ago. The same demon came out of my wardrobe, but this time it stood over me staring into my soul. I couldn't move or scream. It was horrifying. We watched back the video footage, and we saw a shadow on my side of the bed. Also in the kitchen, we saw the same shadow near the kitchen sink, and seconds later, the tap started dripping. We were no longer staying in that house. We stayed with my mother until we could sell the house and find something else. In the meantime, we went to church every Sunday, as we were certain we had encountered a demon. The church looked after us, and we were in safe hands. A few months passed, and we moved into our new home, and we instantly felt at peace in this house. We pray every day that nothing like that would ever happen to us again. Me and my younger brother used to go hiking and camping whenever we had time off work. We had explored a few different trails and would usually just stick to the same ones. A while ago, my brother wanted to go on a hike, but I was too busy with work, so he went by himself. He went late in the evening, but when he got to the trail, he was actually freaked out. He said he just had a weird feeling and thought he heard whispers in the trees. He also said he noticed a small blue car, which looked abandoned. When we were discussing places we could go for our camping trip, I recommended the trail he went to and wasn't sure of. It took a lot of convincing, but I told him it would be fine, and we will be together. I did some research on the trail the night before. Online it said the area was quiet, and not many people commented on it. It did mention how there are beautiful scenic views at the top, with a nice camping ground. This did make me question why the area wasn't explored much. This didn't put me off, but I knew it would make my brother worry, as we normally go to places that are popular and have other hikers around. We arrived at the forest and saw another car parked up at the beginning of the trail. The scary thing is, my brother told me it was the same blue car he saw the last time he was here. We parked up and got our gear out of the car. Just as we were approaching the starting point, we heard a car door open. We both automatically looked back, and there was a man getting out of the car. We carried on. I didn't really think much of it, but knowing this trail isn't used much made me feel a little tense. The hike up to the camping ground wasn't too bad. It was quite far out. We weren't too far from the camping ground, maybe 10 minutes. This was when we started hearing footsteps. We both looked behind us and saw the same man. The thing that made me question was the fact he did not have any proper gear on him, just a small backpack. My brother gave me a look of fear. We carried on but picked up our pace and made it to the camping ground. I checked behind us when we made it to the top, and the man had vanished. Weird. It was getting dark, so we set up the tent together and then got some wood and sticks for our campfire. Lucky for us, within the trees next to our tent, there was lots of wood. We were collecting for about 10 minutes, chatting and looking at the scenic views through the trees. We headed back to our tent, and we were shocked at what we saw. There was a tent set up opposite ours, about 15 feet away. My brother said how weird the area was and was worried why one man appeared to be following us. I reassured him and said that it's a camping ground, there's bound to be people around. He then proceeded to tell me he had also done research on the area and knows not many people come here. He went and sat in the tent to calm down. I started setting up the campfire. As I was doing so, I was nosing at the tent in front of us, and there didn't seem to be anyone there. I started thinking to myself and got very creeped out. The man had only a backpack. I wondered how he was able to fit a tent so big in it. I did start questioning things. I shouted for my brother to come out of the tent. I said to him my thoughts and told him how I didn't think anyone was in the tent. I asked him to stay back while I went to look over there. Looking back on it, I'm so glad I did. I walked my way to the tent and shouted, "Hello." I had no reply. The tent was open and I could see inside. What I saw made my skin run cold. The tent was full of axes, chains, and knives. Horrified, I stood still in shock. My brother shouted my name. I ran back to him and said we needed to leave. We grabbed our bags and ran, forgetting about our tent. We got back on the trail, and I looked behind me to see if the man was there, and he was. He stood still on the camping ground, giving me a creepy grin. We got out of there. Running as fast as we could, we made it back to the car. I don't often share this story as it still creeps me out to this day. We question what that man was up to, and what would have happened if we stayed. I'm so thankful I looked in that tent. The man could have just been up there hunting, but we did not feel safe, and there's no way we would have taken a risk in staying. I worked in a small factory for a couple years. I didn't particularly love the job, I just needed the money. It was a normal evening. My shift started at 8 and would finish at 4 in the morning. The factory was small, so there was only me and one other worker on shift. I was in charge of the packaging and labeling. This would usually keep me busy all shift, as there were quite a lot of products to pack. It got to 11 o'clock, and my colleague wanted to go on her break. She told me she was going to the nearest shop and then spending the rest of her break in her car. I was fine with that. I decided to do some cleaning, as the factory was a little messy. I started wiping down the machinery and then moved on to mopping the floors. I was disturbed by an awfully loud bang. My first thought was some packaged products must have fallen off the forklift. I went to look, and nothing appeared to be out of place. I carried on with my cleaning and the work phone started ringing. I picked it up, and it was my colleague. She rang me to tell me she had been sick and wasn't feeling good. She said she was going home and apologized. This then meant I was alone in the factory, and I didn't particularly like being alone on the night shifts. I just carried on and put my earphones in to distract myself. An hour had passed, and I decided to go for my break. I sat down, relaxed, and ate my food. 45 minutes into my break, I heard another bang. But this time, it wasn't as loud. I jumped up out of my seat and looked around. I went to the storage room where most of the packages were kept. I noticed loads of boxes were opened, as if someone had tampered with them. I then heard footsteps. I knew someone was out there, and it wasn't a worker. I shut myself in the room and pushed loads of boxes in front the door. I instantly called the police for help. They arrived and searched the whole factory. They informed me the back door had been opened and that someone had forced entry. They also said there were muddy footsteps by the door. Nobody was there. There is proof, but the police said they must have left when they heard sirens. I went home, and the police stayed and blocked off the door. They were also trying to find and collect more evidence. I couldn't help but question if they were trying to steal stuff or if they were after me. This made me hand in my notice and look for work elsewhere, as I was worried it would happen again. My grandpa was very ill and needed to be checked on every 2 hours. My father and mother stayed the majority of the time, but they wanted to spend the day out, as they have not been out for a long time. He had only been like that for a few months, so to give my mother and father time alone, I happily looked after him. He was only eating yogurts and soup and drinking water or juice. I had to help him with feeding. After his food, he managed to get some sleep. I stayed there for around 10 minutes, and once I knew he was settled, I went to grab a snack from the kitchen. As I entered the kitchen, I heard a loud bang. I rushed back to my grandpa, and the bed was empty. I was so confused. The room had an ensuite, so my first reaction was to look in the bathroom. I was completely shocked with what I saw. My grandpa was standing in the bathtub, facing the wall. I tried speaking to him, but he didn't reply. I did manage to settle him back into bed. The scariest thing about this was my grandpa was bedbound and had very little mobility. I sat in the chair next to him. I not long received a call from my father asking if it was okay for me to spend the night there, as they wanted to spend the night out. I was fine with this, as they deserved it. I didn't tell them anything until they came home the next day. It was soon nighttime and time for bed, so I chose to sleep on the sofa, which was right next to my grandpa's room. He had settled and slept since the weird situation. I did wake him a few times for a drink of water, soup, and another yogurt. He settled really well. I managed to get to sleep around 10-ish, and I was soon woken by footsteps walking around. It took me a second to get up, as I thought I was hearing things. When I got up, my grandpa was standing in the far corner of the living room, staring into a mirror that was against the wall. I was so creeped out, as he shouldn't have been able to do that. I got him back into bed and decided to stay in the chair next to him. I nodded off and woke the next morning to the sound of my parents coming home. I explained what had happened. They were just as shocked as I was. I know that he did have the start of dementia, so maybe that was the cause, but still, nothing can explain how he got to the bathroom and how he got into the bathtub. My grandpa unfortunately passed away a few weeks later and is now in a better place. But it does still creep me out.